Kevin Tierney with MoreThanTheCurve.com. Today we are interviewing Frank Bernhardt. He is a magisterial judge for the west side of Conshohocken and Plymouth Township. He has been in the position for how many years?
19.
19 years. He's the incumbent running this year. And why don't you get us started by just giving us your background, where you grew up, take us through school, and how you ended up living in Conshohocken, Plymouth Township.
All right. Hello, everybody. It's Frank Bernhardt, and the Fran was a little much, so thankfully when 8th grade came, I got. But I was born in Southwest Philadelphia. That's where my parents were from, and I was raised in Delaware County. And I ended up on this side of the river because I married a lady that born and bred in Lafayette Hill that's lived in Montgomery County her whole life. I was blessed at an early age because my parents put a premium on education. My mom didn't graduate high school, and my dad barely did, from John Bartram School in West Philadelphia. And my dad's still with us at 91, and he's a pretty sharp guy. And I got the chance to go to Waldron Academy, and then I went to Malvern Prep, and then I went to Gettysburg College. And while at Gettysburg, I was a history major. The battlefield was absolutely beautiful. You had to pick a major, and I loved to read. So that's why. It wasn't because of the Civil War, but the battlefield is gorgeous. And then I worked for a couple of years, and unbelievably, I had Gennardi's and Clemens as clients, which were centered out of Norristown in this area. So I got to know it. So it was fortuitous when I eventually met my wife, Mary, and she was an RN, and we're blessed with 4 children. But in those couple of years, when I got to know the area, then I went to law school at Capital Law School in Columbus, Ohio, which is like a smaller version of Temple. It's one of the few schools that has a clinic for years where you got to actually practice law while you were going to school in the middle of your second year. So that's my background. 3 of my adult children are in the military. They're Navy, they're Naval Academy grads, and the other son went to Villanova. He's local in Lafayette Hill with 2 of the grandsons, and the other 2 just got back from Djibouti. The older son just got back from Djibouti. He has the other 2 grandsons, and he lives in Annapolis. He's an attorney in Annapolis. My daughter just left the submarine forces, and she's getting married in September. She's getting married to a guy that's a P-8 pilot that hunts for submarines on our coasts, and he's an admiral's aide right now. And our youngest son, Patrick, is a helicopter pilot at Jacksonville with the Navy.
Wow. So give us so 19 years ago, you get elected for the first time. What does a magisterial judge do? That's a mouthful, that one. What's like the course of the day? What kind of cases do you see? How do you interact with the public? That kind of thing.
All right, and I apologize for the quick correction, but the prior judge, Kevin, suddenly resigned.
Okay.
And I was a Plymouth commissioner. And my part of Plymouth, Cardinal View, where I live, it's called the 4th Ward. It's the area along Ridge Pike, the Sierra Shasta neighborhood, and Cardinal View, Kennedy Crossing, and the apartments. And I've always been in the minority. I've been in the opposite party my whole career, and it's a bipartisan position. And what happened was the governor at the time, Governor Ridge, the Democrats put forth a candidate, and so did the Republicans, and his office didn't think either one was up for the job. And I said I would do it. It was a 2-year appointment. And I really loved the job, and I decided then to run, and I ran in 03 and 09, getting bipartisan support. I didn't have opposition in 15. So that brings us why I have an odd number. People without the appointments would be finishing their 18th year. So I'll actually have 20 years at the end of this, and that explains the year difference. But to answer your question, magisterial district judge is a great position. 2 things, except for being on call when you have the whole county, especially a Saturday or Sunday in the summer. And election time, but I like people, so that's the fun part of it. The nonsense is the nonsense, but I love getting to see and meet more new people, because we always have a flux. People move out and new people come in. But we have, as far as caseload, we have civil cases till 12,000 jurisdiction, meaning auto cases. A family hires a workman and they're not happy with the job. somebody in one of our many businesses has an employment issue. We have landlord-tenant cases where, the landlord doesn't want the tenant anymore, or the tenant has problems with the landlord. We had the first two stages of criminal hearings, from shoplifting to homicide. And I've had some serious cases over the years. Then we have search warrants. We have, when they're investigating. And then we have criminal hearings, which are called preliminary hearings, but first stage is a preliminary arraignment. And that's one disadvantage of using a cell phone with a Zoom call with you, Kevin, because someone tried to call us and they came through and off they went. So pre-COVID, I'd have criminal cases Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to not get a backlog of any kind. But with COVID, they're just, because it's up with the prisons and the police department and the public defender's DA's office, they're giving you just one day. So late, my Tuesdays have been jam-packed with criminal cases.
And basically you're the front line of the court system.
Yeah, and it's where, unless people have jury duty, they're going to see my level court before anybody else's. And as a lawyer, I hated waiting. I don't like waiting in a dentist office, doctor office, anywhere. It's just my personality. And with all that schooling, I'm really lucky because I was the typical boy that bounced off the walls. And thankfully for my aunt that was a school principal, I had a lot of tutoring over the years. So I don't know what they call it now, but let's just say I had many learning differences. So I'm really blessed to be in my position. But I don't like to keep people waiting. So my office has always done our best of scheduling cases so people's days aren't interrupted. And we've tried about everything too. We even had night court for several years to help out. And believe it or not, people thought they would like it. And then they really ended up not liking it because they'd rather have, I guess, that doctor appointment, dentist appointment during the day than have because their nights are, relaxing, homework, all sorts of things. So we've tried a lot of different things over the years.
They're bringing back the TV show Night Court. Do you see that?
Yeah, I have a brother-in-law who I dearly love. And we're down the shore a couple of years ago. It's Frank. Yeah, Matt, what do you need? Oh, this Judge Judy show is great. And I'm like, Matt, that's what I do sometimes. And I don't really want to watch it.
The other day when we spoke, you kind of talked about what your office does outside of the courtroom, with the programs what's the right word? To keep people out of prison and jail. Take us through what that is.
Yeah, I get a lot of compliments for my staff, from how we treat folks and attorneys and all different walks of life. So those compliments thankfully go to court administration. So whenever there's a new program, we're usually one of the 3 or 4 courts out of the 30 in Montgomery County that are asked to get involved. And whether it's community service for children or young adults or teenagers, whether it's underage drinking, possessions of marijuana, before the law somewhat changed a little bit, because now it's considered in Plymouth a township ordinance violation. So people don't have to get a record from it. But with the community service program, since I was not a perfect child, perfect teenager growing up, I'm very conscious that a mistake can mark a person's life. And colleges and employers buy records constantly from the court system. So we've been very big on implementing community service for summary and minor violations, disorderly conduct and the like that I just mentioned earlier. And I've had very few repeats. And our system was emulated by a lot of the other courts because, being an attorney, I'll have releases drawn up. So that, the firehouse, the fellowship house, the libraries. If a young person twists their ankle, those nonprofits don't have to worry about getting sued. I mean, anything egregious, that would be another matter. But for minor matters, we've taken care of that. And then the programs from the courthouse, there's a program called TOP, and that's why my court was one of the 3 people picked. It's Targeted Opioid Program. With the drug courts, they were handling people 9 months after the arrest. When they started this program, the TOP program, they started giving people help right after the preliminary hearing. So we were one of the first courts that was used to help people right away. Also, with Judge Gitsicki, we've before he retired, I started a lot of mental health, issues to call Montgomery County Emergency Services the minute we noticed someone that didn't seem right, regardless of the charges, because you want people to get help, whether it's a veteran, whether it's a person fighting an addiction, whether it's a person that suffers no fault of their own. When they were conceived, their genetics gave them a mental health issue. So we've done our best to be open and caring to everyone that walks through our doors.
Great. And so everybody knows, so on election day, which is the primary election is May 18th, you're gonna be on both sides of the ballot as well as your opponent, because just like the school board elections, this level judgeship is considered nonpartisan. So they'll find you on the Democrat side and the Republican side. How do you what do you find when you're knocking on doors, campaigning? What do you find people want to talk about? What issues do they bring up to you? That type of thing.
It's a great question. I really enjoy meeting people and knocking on doors. Here's the issue, though. In January, I was driving around and there was a young lady walking her dog. And I had a really great conversation with her. And she said, hey, with COVID, I'm working at home and I have dogs. And someone knocking on the door is going to disrupt me during the day. And then I'm not going to be happy with that person because my day's been interrupted with work. And then I'm going to have a commotion. And she goes, I don't think I think favorably. And I'm a very, I should have a tougher skin since I had 2 races as a council person. Remember, I've always been in the minority. And in 03 and 09, I was blessed to win, and I hope to win again this term. This will be my last term. So I'm very conscious, I'm not just randomly knocking on doors. I'm looking for activity because I don't want to disrupt people. So I've driven around a lot. It was great. I handed out door knockers on 2,500 homes. There's some local children that were high school students that I know because when I walk in my neighborhood, they're playing basketball. Hey, Mr. Bernhardt. Hey, Frank. Hey, Coach. Because I used to coach for 18 years, all different sports. So some of the local guys that live here and gals, I was able to employ them for 3 or 4 times each, and giving them a decent, some decent money, and they were appreciative, and I was, because a lot of people don't realize how big Plymouth is. The west side of Conshohocken too is like San Francisco. And I'm kind of, a side note, I'm blessed because from the firehouse, as I'm a life member, and from coaching people and knowing families, I know the people here. Like, people know me. And yeah, it's a bipartisan position. We want our doctors to be good. We want our dentists to be good. We want our judges to be good. I'd never asked anybody what their political party is in those occupations, and nor do most people care or want to care. They just want someone to have integrity and to be fair and good. And one of the things I've pushed, and I've gotten a lot of bipartisan support, like people on council that are the opposite party, people from school board that are, this party stuff, which has gotten bigger and bigger. And we all know why it got bigger. But I'm not a fan of those people that made it. I don't think I've ever watched a debate. As a matter of fact, I don't think I ever watched a TV show where a guy was featured and got to know the whole country. It's not me. And the other part of it is being an attorney in Philadelphia, Kevin, where I manage my firm, because I hired someone 20 years ago to say, hey, Warren, can you handle my trial schedule? And Warren Siegel's a great attorney, and Frank Bernhardt, my other partner, is a Department of Justice employee. It was a prosecutor for them. We don't advertise word of mouth, so no one controls or owns me out here. And what I'd like people to know is, township boards and school boards, that's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of vendors. It's a lot of engineers and attorneys and $1 million budgets. I have 5 people that work at my court, Kevin, and the last opening we had was 6 years ago. And I put word out everywhere that I just wanted someone good. And all my people are good, and they're good people.
How often do you get recognized by someone who's been before you?
Well, you know what the best compliment I've had is? A guy that is that I put in jail twice asked me for signs.
Wow.
And said I deserved to be there. When it was a beautiful Saturday about 6 weeks ago, because we've had some not great weather. I don't know how those people do it in Maine. Those poor kids in high school, they're playing baseball and softball and lacrosse and spring sports. I don't know how they do it up there. But as you know, we've had some brutal weather. But I'm talking, I knocked at the house, I put something, a guy came out. And the guy starts walking towards me and he's holding a big knife. And I'm going like, I think he was cutting up something in the kitchen. But most smart people would have said, I think I'll go backwards now. But he's a veteran that has been in my court a couple of times, recognized me and said, you were right and I was wrong with the dog situation, but I just want you to know. I kind of wish he had left the knife in the kitchen, whatever he was doing with it, because it's kind of a big knife. But people just want to know that they're treated with fairly and have a chance to be heard. And I know I'm talking a lot, but a lot of times kids that make wrong turns, Charlie Brown Christmas show that comes on, the teacher, wah, 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 that's what they hear, because whether it's their parents, whether it's counselors that are trying to help them, they're talked down to. And when I have people like that in court that are young people and they open up and they talk for a while, then oftentimes I'll repeat back to them almost verbatim what they said. It's really interesting from young people, Kevin, that I learned. They say in their minds, he's listening to me, because I learn stuff every day in this job. And I spoke at one of our schools recently, if I can say, and I told them, we were talking about digital presence, and you and I are using laptops and cell phones right now to communicate. And I try to explain to them, like, hey, we said something we shouldn't have said years ago, went in one ear and out the other. With me, Mr. Sensitive, maybe it lasted a little bit longer, but they have to realize that anything they put out there is on a billboard on 95. It's there forever. And so I think it's very, very tough being a young person today with all this technology. It's the good and the bad.
How has, over the last 20 years, like what comes before you, the reaction of being in court, like, changed over that like almost 20-year period, especially with all the digital stuff? Like, do you have like digital evidence? Like, do you have a lot of more like video evidence and stuff now, or is that not at the level?
No, I was actually thinking, because it actually happened today, because somebody had a situation and they had got some bad news with COVID and they didn't react well to it. And then somebody that was a witness was trying to say, oh, I didn't call, you know what I mean? And they don't realize the technology is out there. And we've had some fascinating, serious cases. It's like right out of like TV shows. Like, I was only in the Delaware County DA's office for a short time, and when I was in law school, and I don't think the technology was there at that time, and then mostly doing civil work. But they have black lights; they can tell blood spatters. We had a case once that was solved weeks after a poor gentleman was killed, because when they found his body, his pacemaker had numbers on it. Pacemakers weren't as prevalent years ago as they are now. And then the whole thing started to unravel. We're very in Plymouth Township and Conshohocken because we have some very, very good police officers and departments. And it's very, very interesting. That's an important part of the job because we've had, based on our location, a lot of big cases. So you have to have somebody in this job that kind of knows what they're doing. But on the same breath, the Commonwealth cares about traffic and non-traffic because that's revenue. So that's been a whole other thing. And I'm pretty fiscally, I watch the pennies because, the people should understand the legislature sets the fines and costs. So I've had some interesting conversations when I am allowed to with the legislature on those kind of topics.
So the area you cover, is a line literally right down Fayette Street, or does all of Fayette Street go to one court and not the other?
Yeah, I guess thankfully I have more of the boring side. Yeah, the bars and are on one side, and I have the west side. So I have the Flacco side and the funeral parlor side. Yeah,
Flacco's, banks, and funeral parlors.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too because this part of Plymouth Township is kind of like a suburb of Conshohocken because I can hit, even though I stink at golf and I was a really good caddy, but I stink at golf. I can hit a golf ball in the Conshohocken from my house.
Mm-hmm. There's a line in the middle of the street, so you get everybody going. Someone gets caught for speeding or something going down Fayette Street. They're on your side.
Yes, and the other court, it's actually brilliant, and I'll give accolades. It was Chief Doherty years ago. They actually wanted to, when they were changing numbers around, because our court was so busy compared to others, they wanted to put Conshohocken over in Gladwin and with that court. And I was like, it would have been, a really different mix and for the departments and judge. I was like, people are coming like, Judge, that's not going to work. And so I was talking to Chief Doherty and he goes, hey, the bridge is a problem enough. Could you imagine our guys trying to get back or forth at rush hour if there's an emergency? So even with all our knowledge and studies and everything, sometimes it's common sense that really works out the best. And what I mentioned earlier about the legislature is, people, it's supposed to be neutral blind with fines and costs with certain things, and people are really concerned about their insurance rates. But the costs have risen so much over the years that being fiscally conservative, I kind of said to people, like, why don't you just cut the fines and costs? Because we all have families and friends. We all want to drive safely. During the beginning of COVID, there was hardly any traffic. Then it became like NASCAR out there. And we just want everybody to be safe, when I say we, meaning me as a person. And we all have families. So that's what I'm talking about. But so you fully appreciate the numbers from my area prop up a couple other courts. Like the Blue Route that is in Plymouth Township goes to the judge in White Marsh. My turnpike going through Plymouth and White Marsh go to the judge in Springfield to prop up her numbers. So we're just a busy area. We're a safe area, but we're where all the roads meet. Location, location, location.
Every couple of years, the issue of local police having radar comes back up. And I've never challenged a speeding ticket, ever. I just pay them and figured I was doing it, so I might as well pay the penalty. What's the actual proof of someone speeding when it comes to the court when there's not radar involved?
It's a fascinating thing, and it's open to human error. And remember, since congratulations on your recent birthday, but I'm almost, you're my much brother. Cars years ago, it seemed that when you were in a car and you were going over a certain speed, whatever that was, you felt the car. Now with the suspensions and everything else, you're moving. Sometimes people look down and listen. I've gotten speeding tickets, thankfully not in our Commonwealth, but years ago in that place when we go towards the beach, and and I paid them. But you don't realize how fast you're going. But believe it or not, anybody can realize this. If you look at roads, and there are certain roads, and we all know, why are they a certain speed? Are they speed traps? Well, no, they're not commercial areas. They're where people live. So if you look at some of those roads, I'll give you an example, like Butler, like Germantown. If you see there's lines on the road, and what oftentimes police do is they'll sit back and it's a stopwatch. When the front tires hit one line and the front tires then hit the next line, and then you do the mathematical equation. And most of our officers will give people a break for, there's some line out of the state police, 7-year fine, 9-year fine. And what it basically means is 7 miles and over, they're not going to bother you, 9 miles. But we all know on the turnpike, people are flying. You go the speed limit on the turnpike, sometimes you're afraid of getting rear-ended. But it's really, you want people to be safe. And there is the way people drive, and sadly, I saw the statistic years ago, there's sadly 13 teenagers a day die from texting while driving. My son was captain of, my youngest son was captain of a crew team in high school. And the star rower actually died before the big meet, because he was either grabbing food or grabbing his cell phone. And he was in a big car, and he hit a curb, and he was thrown from the car. He didn't have a seatbelt on, and sadly died. And I'm not making up this at all. He was a junior in high school, and he had a 7th letter from Harvard for crew at his house that night that he never opened.
Wow.
Yeah. So all of us that live, and, I just saw a blurb that, 2 teenagers died, going to a prom recently. And it's kind of tough. So you can really help youth out. And it's really, that's neat about being up for office here. Somebody had bought a house over on Sierra, and he grew up in my neighborhood, and some friends were helping him. And they go, "Hey, Bernie." "Oh, Judge, that's okay. We call you Bernie." I was in front of you. Yeah. They're in their 30s. They're in their early 30s. And you don't remember, but it's nice that when you walk around here, when people either say "Hi, Judge" or "Hi, Coach."
So how can people find out information about your campaign? You have a website, social media accounts?
Yeah. Again, 12 years, and a lot's happened in 6 years. Yeah, it's a lot social media. So, I have Reelect Frank Bernhardt. It's a Facebook site. I have my personal Facebook site. I have a, Judge Frank Bernhardt website. And, I really have a grassroots campaign. I don't have a major political party behind me, and nor do I want one, nor have I ever had one. Again, when I was on Plymouth Council, my closest buddy was Frank Gillen, and he was there, and anybody can contact him. I was in 2 physical fights and a lot of screaming matches, because that's why when the judgeship opened up, I said, "Get me out of there." It was a rough time in Plymouth Township. There's a lot of building going on, and some things, as a lot of our friends say, were not kosher at all. So I said it earlier, I made my money in Philadelphia. When I got involved, a guy said to me that was active, "Hey, do you want a solicitorship, school board, solicitorship, zoning board?" And I'm like, "No, thank you. No, thank you." I didn't want to be beholden to anybody. So I was lucky I got on council, and I tried to make some changes. A lot of people don't realize Metroplex was supposed to be double the size it is now. And I'm proud of the things I fought. My name's not on the big rock because I got appointed then to being a judge, but the baseball stadium, a lot of people said, "Oh, that'll be 55 and older homes or townhouses." 55 and older would have been a better That's what they wanted, but it was going to be townhomes. And I didn't buckle. And everybody wanted that piece of land on Walton Road. And what had happened was our high school at the time and our Legion teams were playing at JFK Park. And Kevin, with metal bats, the balls were hitting people walking on the walkway or going in people's homes. So that, believe it or not, that Villanova Stadium, as it's called, was supposed to be in Sutcliffe. But sadly, it got political because people heard baseball stadiums, tons of crowds. And Conshohocken Little League could have used that. And it's a shame because it would have been better, closer for Villanova, everything. But then when the opportunity came about, two of the people on council, one's wife worked at Villanova and one was a double graduate. So it was only the three of us. I took heat on that. And it was the best use of the property. So my name's not on the rock, but I know who put it there and who marshaled it through. My name's on the community center of Plymouth, and with some people that were on council right before me, because at that time there wasn't a need for that old school. People wanted that developed on Jolly, and that's our local. Plymouth doesn't have a town square. That's our local little place where people can go to, and that's a great place. And so people understood we didn't want the trash to steam plant years ago, and three great ladies in Plymouth and Conshohocken helped fight that. And while they lost out because no one knew the effects of recycling, remember, everybody thought we were going to run out of trash places. So I know the history of our town and our borough. And right near the end, the sharp guys said, "Oh, ladies, you can lower that tower from 130 feet to 80 feet because it'll be less eye pollution. You won't see the tower as much." It's kind of fascinating to know this stuff. And those ladies were darn bright, just like my two sisters I grew up with. You know what they said? No, leave it that way, because prevailing winds, if there's anything toxic in that air, it blows elsewhere and not at Plymouth and Conshohocken.
Issues come back up, kind of circle back around, I guess.
It is
15, 20 years.
Yeah, and there's some bright people in Conshohocken holding their feet to the fire on that issue. And that's one thing great about being up for office, because I'm aware of that now.
All right. Well, thank you very much. It's great learning about the court and your campaign.
Kevin, thanks so much for having me. And you remember what, since you're from North Carolina originally?
Yes.
Well, you know what Abraham Lincoln once said, right?
Well, he said a lot of things.
He said a couple of famous things. But one of the great things he said, "I'd like to see a man proud of the place where he's from. Even better, I'd like to see a place proud of." And that's all I've tried to do in raising a family here and marrying a beautiful woman. And again, I'm blessed to be in this position, and I'd like to do one more term. So thanks, Kevin.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Be well.